Welcome to the Puberty Prof podcast, where information and tools are shared to help you have conversations about puberty and other growing up topics. Here is your host, Lori Reichel, the Puberty Prof, a nationally recognized health educator, author of the award-winning book, Common Questions Children Ask About Puberty, and creator of the Talk Puberty app.
Hi, and welcome to the Puberty Prof podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lori Reichel, the Puberty Prof. As you might know, young people are very curious, in which when we bring up the topic of puberty and adolescence, young people have a lot of questions. And that's why I wrote my book, Common Questions Children Ask About Puberty. So today, what we're going to talk about on the Puberty Prof podcast are some of the common questions young people ask about body parts and experiences about most boys, or for most boys, if I say it like that. So to help me out, I invited Dr. Ryan Fisk. I met Ryan many years ago in New York, and he's affiliated with New York State AFERD. And I remember him as just being a passionate, updated person for health education, but also some other things he's going to share with you in a moment. So before I continue, Ryan, would you like to say hi to our audience?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
And thanks again for being here today, Dr. Fisk. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your background?
Sure, absolutely. So most of my background is in secondary education. I was a health and physical education teacher for quite some time. Was a district director of PE, health and athletics for some time, and actually took a turn into technology, an area I've always been passionate about. I serve now as a director of technology for a school district on Long Island, and I'm always looking, and even as a health and PE teacher, I've always been looking to marry effective technology into health PE, and now in my current role, embedding technology into all different content areas for the sake of our students, for the betterment of our instruction, and just to keep kids engaged and make learning personal, meaningful, and authentic.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. And thanks for doing what you do for your school district. Thank you. Today, we're going to be going over some questions that are commonly asked that pertains to more boys. And before I start those questions, do you remember going through puberty, that experience?
Yes, I do. There were I guess two parts of the experience I remember. There was the education part, and then there was the actual puberty part. And because of the way boys and girls undergo these changes, sometimes they're not always in lockstep with each other. For me, speaking to the education part, it was fifth grade. That was the time we got in school to talk. I actually brought a souvenir with me today for this podcast. Hold it up for you. This was the book that I and my classmates that we received as part of the talk for the boys. For those of you just listening, if you can't see this, I'm just holding up a little soft cover resource here that our teacher gave us as we were discussing the changes in the body and some things to expect.
And thanks for doing that. It's a great reminder that if you'd like to watch this episode, you can go to the YouTube channel of Lori Reichel, the Puberty Prof. So this is available on YouTube as well as on your favorite podcast platform. So do you remember anything more specifically about those physical changes? And you don't have to answer this question. I'm just wondering, and if something comes to mind, and it might happen as we're going over some questions.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the more notable, I guess for me, and perhaps it was less in changes with genitalia and everything else that for the most part we do commonly liken with puberty. For me, it was the cracks in the voice. It was the growth spurt. Those are some of the other biological changes that happen as you progress into adolescence, as you go through puberty. And that was, I guess, part of my, and I think, my peers, my classmates around me, those are the things that were more easily noticed. And, I guess discussed during class, some formally, informally, there were changes to skin, development of acne, all totally normal. And maybe the double-edged sword or double whammy, I should say, as you're going into, middle school for boys. Typically, this is where the change is occurring, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. Middle school for many, and I'm sure many of us listening and watching can probably relate to this. Middle school is a stressful time in general, and then you throw puberty and all these changes that are happening into the mix, and it's a lot to contend with. And going to the skin changes, acne and everything else, they typically correlate that with stress. So it's stress, yes, but then it's also puberty, yes. And I have that in the book to prove it. So I would say that was one of the things that you should expect. Your skin is secreting more oil, which is why it's important to wash, to shower, and everything else, and particularly to pay attention to your skin and more particularly your face.
I noticed too that you seem to remove any facial hair that you get.
Yes, yeah. So I'm trying to think about when I started that routine. When I was younger, had like platinum blonde hair. So, my facial hair was light and thin. Now, not so much. So yeah, I actually, and I'm getting a little of you can't see it now because yes, I am shaving. So, I'm getting a little of the, what do you call it? Salt and pepper. So my hair up here is for the most part, like a sandy blonde, like a light brown, but I am, grooming, and the facial hair, hair under your arms, genital area, that's all part of those changes too.
Okay. And to remove any of that hair is certainly a personal decision. Like when I pointed out that you have a fresh, it looks like a fresh shaved face on my side through Zoom. So, and that's a personal decision that you make. Oh, he's putting his face a little closer to the Zoom here, folks. Very funny. And can I go back to the cracking of the voice?
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you were younger, potentially you still had a house phone. Did you ever pick it up in which somebody thought you were a female because your voice was changing? Did you ever have that experience?
I can't say I've had that experience, although
Okay.
maybe beyond the scope of that question, I sometimes get questioned if I'm a female on the phone now.
Really? Okay.
So I don't. I mean, I can't think specifically to what you're saying. Back then. But I think telephones in general are not, at least for me, are not a good metric of a person's voice and perhaps gender identity either.
Yeah. So if somebody's listening in and that happens to them where people misidentify them, how do you recommend they handle that on the phone?
Well, oftentimes it's somebody who I don't know, who doesn't know that, and my first name is Ryan. So, we have male Ryans, female Ryans. So that name in and of itself doesn't necessarily denote, gender identity. So it's usually somebody who I don't know. So they're calling me Mr. or Mrs. Fisk sometimes, my last name. So if Mrs. Fisk, I'll just, correct them over to Mr. Fisk.
Okay.
That's usually how the correction works, because they're not calling me Ryan because it's it's a vendor, it's whoever else.
Okay. So you correct them quickly and you let it go.
For the most part, yes. Yeah.
Excellent.
I think yes. I think that's a resounding yes.
So if we can jump to something else you had said, and we'll look at questions that kids ask about this, and that's about the reproductive system changes, which includes that the genitals that most boys have will grow, and they'll grow proportionately to other parts of their bodies. So it's just like as our hands grow and it looks proportional to like the rest of our arm and body parts. That's the same thing with the body parts of the external parts of the penis, the scrotum, which holds the testicles. So if we're okay to jump to some questions about that, are you okay with that, Ryan?
Yeah.
So when kids hear about that growth and they hear about testicles, they typically ask the question, what do testicles do? Or why do people have them? Do you want to explain the answers to that?
Absolutely. So let me jump back also with the growth part as well, because
Sure.
I think that's an important point of discussion too. And I do remember, after skimming through once again this book, and there's a lot of information that holds true now. Folks are going to the gym, we're working out, we're staying healthy. Sometimes you're in the locker room, sometimes you happen upon somebody else, you see them, you see genitals, and you say, okay, this is, things look a little bit different. Our bodies, and I think, Laura, you said it perfectly, proportional to the rest of our bodies, we are designed in a certain way anatomically. And I think the size, of genitals and various features is, it's not it's basically how our bodies, the blueprints of how our bodies are designed. Big, medium, small. It's not an indication of how much testosterone, which we can talk about in a subsequent question as well. It's not an indication of how much testosterone or manhood a person may have. It is just how your body is designed. Some folks are tall, some folks are short, higher metabolism, lower metabolism, different waist sizes. We're looking around in the streets. We're all different people, and that's genetics, of course, plays a role in that as well. So role of the testicles, so they produce our sperm, and in the tens of millions is the reservoir. So sperm are available. That's the male sex cell, and that's what we're using to fertilize a female egg, which comes, of course, from the woman's side. Sperm are very small, and they swim around inside of the scrotum, inside of the testicles, which is located inside of the scrotum. And the scrotum plays a unique role as well, because the scrotum helps in regulating the temperature of the testicles. Sperm cells like to live in a little bit of cooler environment. They like to dial the AC up a little bit. So our bodies are 98.6 degrees, but the sperm like to live in a slightly cooler temperature, which is why the testicles and the scrotum exist outside of the male body for that very reason.
You already said that the testicles are held outside the body, held in the scrotum sac. How many testicles does a person typically have?
Typically, there's going to be two.
Can they have one or three?
Yes, the answer to that's yes. Perhaps for a variety of reasons, whether it's for surgical removal or born with an extra one, but the answer would be yes.
Yes. And they can still release sperm and all that. You just need one, because
Right.
when those testicles create sperm and it's released, there are so many sperm that's released that you just need one to fertilize that egg that you referred to earlier. So how would you recommend a young person protect their penis and testicles? Like if they're concerned about them, maybe in sports or for something else?
Well, there's protective equipment for, a cup typically comes to mind, especially if you're, if you're playing baseball, softball, anything where you may come into contact with a projectile, lacrosse, another sport, for example, for those of us on Long Island and in Maryland, big lacrosse towns here. So yeah, there's protective sports equipment that will cover penis, testicles, and make sure that any impact would be, it was like a helmet, basically would just bounce off and make sure you don't get injured.
Now, as a person who does not have scrotum sac and a penis, I can only imagine what it's like to have those parts of the body that kind of hang and they're in your underwear. So, is there sometimes that it can get uncomfortable, or is there a certain type of underwear that people wear for that uncomfortable feeling?
Sure. So, the two major types of underwear, we have boxers and then we have briefs. And then, of course, you have boxer briefs that are really like briefs, but look like boxers. So just to go through that. So boxers are more of a loose fitting loose fitting undergarment where there's really no support. As you mentioned, external things are hanging. So boxers don't really offer you the support. But some would argue that if you're planning to have a family, if you're older, you're mature, you're ready to consider trying to have children, Boxers are sometimes thought of as the better route because they allow, remember talking about temperature regulation, they allow the scrotum to do its work of retracting up to the body when it's cold and dropping further down when it's warm to make sure that that our testicles and sperm cells are kept at the temperature they need to. Boxers will allow for that to happen. Now, when you get into briefs will provide the support and keep everything, close and tight to the body. So, perhaps we could think of that as more comfortable for some. But then, unfortunately, briefs come at the expense of keeping the scrotum sac up against the body, which means that the scrotum can't do, or it's not able to do as well what it's designed to do. So, depending on who you ask, so it's important to know that those two options of underwear that are out there, but really depending on who you ask, and of course where you are in your stage of life, will you may get different opinions from your pediatrician or your doctor.
So I've heard of compression shorts that some people with a penis and a scrotum sac wear, and they kind of like compress things closer to the body. Would you say that's correct?
Yes, I would say that, and I think that that's probably the same concept as wearing briefs, but then to another level because you're using it for heat regulation for the rest of your body. I'm an avid skier, so I wear typically, especially when going out into the cold for 8 hours at a time, like a base layer, and that's compression. That's compression everything. And that wicks away the sweat and it helps keep your body warm, just in the same way that a wetsuit does.
So you made me think of another question that wasn't on our original list, and that is when a person who has a penis and a scrotum sac, it might be more the scrotum sac, say if they are wearing something that is loose briefs or boxers and it gets a little sticky and they want to readjust. Like, I don't feel comfortable when people readjust that part of their body in front of me. And I've witnessed it a little too often because of either coaching or being an administrator of a physical education department. Any advice for somebody that if they have like that happen, how they can handle that?
Well, gosh, I think one thing to point out is maybe preventative measures. So I know a popular product out there. There's like one brand is Gold Bond medicated powder, for example. So that's like a baby powder with some other cooling elements in it as well. That helps to that can help with comfort, especially if it's hot out, especially if you're participating in phys ed class. There's a lot of movement, or if you're playing after school sports, there's a lot of movement, your body's sweating. And of course, male genitalia are external. So, there is some points when if you're running, there's some contact on the inside of your thighs. So sometimes the medicated powder or baby powder can help with that. So that may reduce the need for the readjusting and also afford our young adults some more comfort too. So I guess as far as adjusting, it's an interesting question, and I know that everybody has different perspectives as to what like should I, blowing your nose, sneezing, and there's other things that are I guess part of our bodies as well, and things that we undergo and things that we have to do. And I think as an educator, as a coach, perhaps I might want to establish some house rules if that were important to me, and and maybe just have a word if it's if you have an individual who does adjust themselves often in front of the group, and maybe other people are uncomfortable from that as well. Maybe just pull them over aside privately, discreetly, and maybe just have a word with them and discuss that maybe there's a better place if possible, if they could step out or do that in a more private setting.
Thanks for reminding me of that, because I actually had a course that we were online, we were WebExing, and a student got up and readjusted themselves. And I was like, okay, remember, everybody can see you. And they didn't take the hint. So I actually had to meet with them one-on-one. And he was amazed that he did that. He's like, I'm really sorry, I didn't mean to. But sometimes we have to do that to speak with someone one-on-one.
Right.
Because it was very apparent. It was very apparent. So I do want to remind people that are listening in that if you have a vulva, please don't use powders easily in the genitalia area, because we have the area that can go into the vaginal opening, and there's some research to support that things are not healthy for the inside of the vagina. So please, if you have a vulva, watch what you put into that area of your body. So let me jump to something else that you brought up earlier, and it's the question of, does size matter? Because I've heard some kids go, well, if you have a bigger penis, that means it's better. How would you answer to a person that size doesn't matter?
I mean, I think I'm going to go back to, what I had touched on before, is that, we are all design, genetics serve as the blueprint for how we are going to grow and develop.
Mhm.
And that's the good and the bad. Some of us have, we harbor genetic mutations, and then that could manifest itself in, not to be doom and gloom, but that can manifest itself in complications and things that you need to be aware of at some point in your life. So we're all, we have chromosomes that are written a certain way that basically dictates how we're going to grow and evolve and develop, and that includes genitalia as well. The size of a boy or a man's penis is not indicative of manhood or how much testosterone is in the body, and testosterone is a male hormone that females exhibit as well, but it's more prevalent in our males. So it's not indicative of that either. It's just part of our blueprint. And that's how I'd respond to that. There's no good, better, best in terms of the size of the penis or the testicles. This is just how we're designed.
Now we're coming to the end of today's recording, in which Ryan's going to come back for another episode and talk about more things, more common questions children ask, particularly about occurrences to most boys. So he'll be back. But before we end today, is there anything else you'd like to share, in which we did already cover a lot? If you have nothing else to share, how can people get in touch with you?
I think this was great. I love the questions. It was great to be able to share. I thank everybody for listening, and for those of you that are on YouTube for watching. If anybody would like to reach out, you can find me on Twitter at Ryan_Fisk. There's an underscore between the Ryan and the Fisk. So that's me on Twitter, or you can visit www.fisk, that's fisk.nyc, to learn more about me and to get in touch if you need anything.
And I'll make sure that I have those links in today's description for the podcast episode, in which, Ryan, I thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
And as I said, Ryan's going to be returning to another episode, so stay tuned for that episode. And if you would like to get in touch with me, remember that you can email me at pubertyprof@gmail.com, or go to pubertyprof.com and check out my website. You can fill out a comment box there, and feel free to recommend future episodes and all that. If you want to know more questions about what children ask about puberty, check out my book. It's The Common Questions Children Ask About Puberty, and it's won some awards, including the Mom's Choice Award, which I'm really excited about. Also, you can check out the Talk Puberty app, in which was created. It has questions from the book, Common Questions, and then there's very simple age and developmentally appropriate answers on that app. So I thank you so much for listening in today, and I hope that you have a happy and healthy day.
Thank you for listening to the Puberty Prof podcast, where information and tools are shared to help you have conversations about puberty and other growing up topics. Did you enjoy this episode? Please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also follow the Puberty Prof on Twitter or Instagram. The Puberty Prof, Lori Reichel, wants to hear from you. Go to pubertyprof.com or click on the link in this episode's description. There you can find more information, as well as ask questions to be answered by the Puberty Prof in a future episode. That's pubertyprof.com. Also, remember to check out the Talk Puberty app and the book, Common Questions Children Ask About Puberty. Until next time, this is the Puberty Prof Podcast, where information and tools are shared to help you have conversations about puberty and other growing up topics.